Okay, my microphone is on this time. Alright, so I just recorded for like 30 minutes about this new idea that I had, and I found out that the microphone wasn't on. So I'm just going to show you what I have done and explain why I think it is possibly a new idea in terms of Speedcube engineering. So, as you can probably already see, there's some modifications that have been done here. This is a Moyu RS3M 2021 maglev. It does not have corner-to-core magnets. Now, the new addition is this little gold-looking piece on the center screw. Now, that is a neodymium magnet that I purchased from AMF Magnets. It is a ring magnet, and its dimensions are an outer diameter of 5 millimeters, an inner diameter of 2 millimeters, and a height of 5 millimeters. Now, what is the point of that? What is it exactly doing? So, if you take a look at your standard RS3M maglev core, what you'll see is that, wow, I'm having a problem with this. If you look in here, there isn't another magnet in there. And the center cap right here is pushing down on the skates of the pieces to hold it in place. Now, this is very obvious. Like, this is how cubes have been designed since Erno Rubik's original genius design. That's how it's always been done. Now, I'm not changing that because that's impossible. But I realized something. We started with screws. No, we didn't even start with screws. We started with the cube being held together by paper clips and rubber bands. And then eventually we found out that if we use a locking mechanism on the edges, we can have it snap into place and hold on. And if you look in some cheap dollar store cubes, they don't actually have springs. There's just a little bit of space between the cap and the bottom, and it'll just kind of wiggle. Eventually we figured out that putting in springs in there will hold it together a lot better. Now, for the longest time, screws were being used until we realized that it's putting a lot of friction on the washer that's holding the screw in place. So, for example, the GAN 356 Air SM Special Edition 2019. Or 2018. Yeah, no, it's a 2019. You can see in there that there's a screw being held in by that nut, and that holds the cube together. Now, the issue with this is it actually generates an inordinate amount of friction. So, turning this there's a lot of friction, though to be fair, I haven't kept this thing very well since I stopped using it and got the J-Perm cube, the 2020 RS3M. And this thing also uses screws and springs. You can see it's rusty because I tried to put lubricant in the core like this to try to get it a little bit looser, and it didn't work. It just made everything rusty because I used a water-based lubricant without realizing it. Now, after we discovered that the springs were putting a lot of friction onto the cubies, we switched to using maglev. Now, what's going on in here, and I can actually show you on this piece a little bit better, is there's a magnet on the top here. Focus, please. So magnet on the top, and then if you look in there, there's another magnet on the bottom. Now, these have poles that are facing two of the same side poles, and so when you push on it, they want to push back. And so the great thing about this is now we have a way of having the tension force from a spring without needing a actual physical thing connecting the two pieces, and therefore friction is a lot lower. And as such, the turning quality is a lot better. It's a lot more effortless and a lot less frictiony. Now, all this time, there has been another source of friction that has been being worked on, which is piece-to-piece friction. And like I just said, this is friction that comes from the pieces rubbing up against each other. Now, one night when I was just messing around with the pieces, I realized that the friction here actually isn't all that much. It doesn't feel like it's as much friction as it would be when I put it back together. Because when I put it back together, after testing that friction, it still felt like there was a lot of friction between the pieces. And after some thought, I realized what it was. It was because of the skates being pushed down on by the center caps and the center pieces. And once I realized that, I grabbed my trusty Martian lubricant and I put it on the actual base of the center cap, put it back together, and tried turning. And immediately it was much more buttery. And it felt a lot less like I had to counteract friction every time I turned. Now, while I was thinking about this, I realized something. The magnets that we've been using for the past few years are pushing down on the pieces, keeping them together and generating the friction on here. So now my new idea, which I'm hesitant to say has not been thought of before. I'm sure there's been plenty of people to think of it, but as far as I can tell, I'm the first person to talk about it, is to put another magnet here to push back against the magnet in the base of the centerpiece. Now, why is this good? Because you might think that having that be like that would just mean that the cube is going to be like if you unscrewed the piece a little bit. It will be looser and it's going to be more prone to popping. And even though it might be faster, it's not going to be much better because you're going to have corner twists and other issues to contend with. Well, I thought about that, and I realized that that's actually not a big issue. And it's actually not even an issue at all. Now, the reason for that, and that might be a little bit counterintuitive because I am putting a force pushing against the magnets, and it should be looser. But, as you can see, the loosest side right now, the one that's pulling out, is the white one because I didn't screw it down tight enough just now. It already is... No, I'm not tightening that. Righty-tighty. When you think about it, the piece can only move so far in one direction versus another. That's because eventually it will hit the roof and it can't come out any further. So on this one, there is some give there. And because of that give, you can open it up a lot more because I discovered the friction and decided to loosen it. Well, I didn't discover the friction, I just realized it was there. And so I loosened this, and so now it's a lot more prone to corner twists. Now, because this one is held together tighter, it doesn't have that issue. But in the past, putting it tighter like this would mean more friction because the piece is getting pushed into the other pieces and it's just going to cause more friction. Now, because the main source of friction nowadays is from the centerpiece pushing on the skates, that is really where that friction is coming from. But because there's that magnet pushing against the center, it can't stretch out this way much more, yet it still has a lot... What the... I tightened it too much. I realized what happened, because this side is still fine. I tightened it too much. Because you have to be a little bit careful when you're tightening it, because otherwise the pieces will collide with the magnet. So you got to be a little careful. Okay, there we go. That's about even. Maybe just a little tighter. Okay. Okay, I almost had a heart attack there. So I had tightened it too much. So even though it's significant, like you can't actually corner twist this. It's impossible. If you do it here, where it's looser, you still can't corner twist it. And you also can't really pop a piece out because of where the magnet is. I'll show a picture on screen right here of how close the pieces are to the magnet, which is why I was struggling to turn this just now. because I had tightened it too much. The pieces were actually touching the magnet on the inside, and that was generating an insane amount of friction. So the pieces can't pop out. You can't get a corner twist, but it still feels as like even looser and slidier than this one. And I can go ahead, whoa, and do U2 flicks with one finger. There's a U3, two U3s. Let me see if I can do a U3 here. Not quite. Yeah, I cannot do a U3 here. There's a U3. There's another one. That's a U2. It's a lot. This thing spins way more freely. Now, the reason why it is tighter but still fast is because the counteracting force means I can't pull it this way because it's tighter, but at the same time, it's not being clamped down on the pieces as hard. So it's looser, even though the amount of give that it has is smaller. So this is why I think this is actually probably one of the better ideas that we've seen recently, and I'm very proud to have had it myself. So what this does is it reduces friction and also makes the cubes more stable, which is probably the first time something like this has been discovered since the initial maglev discovery, and then before that, putting magnets in cubes in the first place, because then you didn't have to have it as loose. It would, well, actually, that made it worse. So since maglev was put into cubes, there hasn't really been much that made it easier to turn while also making it more stable. So once again, I got the magnets from AMF Magnets. They are 2 millimeters inner diameter, 5 millimeters outer diameter, and 5 millimeters tall, and they just barely fit in there. So I would personally go with a little bit shorter magnets, and also inner diameter just slightly thicker, though I haven't been able to find any that were 2.5 millimeters, because I really had to like push down to get the inside to give, and then eventually it would get on there. Where are my spare magnets so I can actually show them? I just remember that there they are. So these are the magnets. They just barely fit on the screw, so you have to be a little bit careful. But yeah, I am super excited to get to share this, because this is probably one of the bigger ideas that I've had, at least. I'm not going to say much bigger than other people's in the past, because this really is working off of the incredible discoveries made by the original inventors of maglev in Rubik's Cubes. And without their discoveries, this would not have been possible. But I did find this on my own, and I really have to give myself the credit there, because this thing already turns amazing. And I haven't put any, I just want to clarify, there is no lubricant put in this at all. It is fresh out of the box as of a couple weeks ago, and I haven't played with it since. And in the video where I don't have any mic, I was actually able to tell the difference between these two without actually opening it up. And I guessed right, because this one turns a lot smoother. It's also a little heavier, but it's not that noticeable. But yeah, see, once again, 2 flicks. And that was a 4 flick. Yeah. Do this. It's insanely good. All right. Well, thanks for listening to my unedited rambling with a picture. So, yeah, thanks.